Human follows the echo of Terra finds an alien girl in a deadly tribal ceremony. The jungle was alive with strange sounds, but tonight, one sound stood out. It was sharp, high, and filled with fear. Ryan Cole froze in the middle of a narrow trail, his boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. The air smelled of wet leaves and distant fire. He was deep in the unexplored forests of Carrisford, sent here by the Colonial Survey Corps to map the terrain and record wildlife. But this was not the sound of an animal, it was a scream, and it echoed again through the giant trees, bouncing off their twisted roots and glowing moss. Ryan's hand moved to the small energy pistol on his belt. His eyes scanning the darkness, his heart was already beating faster than it should. He had been on enough dangerous planets to know that screams usually meant trouble, and trouble here could mean anything: wild beasts, hostile tribes, or worse. Another scream came, but this time it was broken, like the voice was running out of strength. Ryan took a deep breath. He could walk away, head back to camp, and mark the area as unsafe. That was the smart thing to do, but something in that voice pulled him forward. It was not just fear, there was desperation. Someone was calling for help. He moved quietly through the vines and thick ferns, each step careful not to snap a twig. The deeper he went, the louder the sound of drums became. They were slow at first, then faster, matching his heartbeat. A faint orange glow lit the air ahead. Flickering like firelight, Ryan crouched and moved closer, the earth under him soft and slippery from rain. Through the leaves he saw them. Figures stood around a huge fire, their bodies painted in ash and crimson. They wore bone necklaces and masks shaped like beasts, their eyes hidden behind shadows. Some held long spears, others beat on drums made from stretched hide. At the center of the fire circle was a tall wooden pole, and tied to it was a girl, not human, but clearly intelligent. Her skin was pale silver, her hair long and white like fresh snow. Her eyes, wide and bright violet, searched the crowd, then stared into the fire. She wore simple cloth, now torn and dirty. Her wrists and ankles were tied tightly with rope. Ryan's stomach tightened as he realized what he was looking at. It was a ceremony, but not the kind that ended in dancing or celebration. The way the warriors moved, the way the fire was fed with oil, the way the drums pounded it, was all building toward something final. And from the way the girl was tied, Ryan knew it would end with her death. He shifted slightly to get a better view, but his boot slipped on a wet root. The sound was small, but one of the warriors near the edge of the firelight looked up sharply. Ryan froze, holding his breath. The warrior scanned the trees for a moment, then turned back to the fire. Ryan let out his breath slowly. The leader of the group, a tall figure wearing a feathered headdress, raised his hands. The drums stopped instantly. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by the crackle of the fire. From the shadows, a masked figure stepped forward, carrying a blade made of black stone. Its edge caught the firelight, glowing for a second like a drop of molten lava. The girl's body tensed, her eyes locked on the blade. Ryan's hand gripped his pistol. His mind screamed at him to think of a plan, but all he could feel was the tight pull in his chest, the deep, urgent knowledge that if he didn't move now, she would die. The masked figure began to chant, and the warriors joined in, their voices deep and rhythmic. The leader circled the fire, speaking in a language Ryan didn't know. The blade was lifted high above the girl's head. She closed her eyes, her lips moving in what might have been a prayer. Ryan's fingers curled tighter around the pistol, his muscles tense. He could almost hear his old commander's voice in his head, telling him that stepping into a situation like this was suicide. But he had never been good at following orders, especially when someone's life was on the line. The drums started again, faster now, almost frantic. The chanting grew louder, the fire roared higher, as someone threw more oil into it. Sweat ran down Ryan's face, though the night air was cool. His eyes met hers for a brief second. Her expression was a mix of fear and a strange kind of hope. It was enough. He knew in that moment he wasn't going to walk away. Not tonight, not ever. Ryan took one slow breath, his legs tensed. His mind went quiet, and then, just as the blade began to fall, he moved. Ryan's boots hit the ground hard. As he broke from the cover of the trees, the warriors nearest to the edge of the circle, jerking in shock. The masked figure holding the black blade froze for half a heartbeat. That was all Ryan needed. His shoulder slammed into the shaman's chest, sending the figure sprawling into the dust, the blade clattering across the ground. A roar of outrage rose from the crowd. Spears lifted, drums stopped. Firelight threw every shadow into sharp motion. Ryan didn't think. He was already cutting through the ropes around the silver-haired girl's wrists, the fibers rough against his fingers. Her eyes snapped open, confusion and disbelief fighting against fear. She said something in a language he didn't understand, but her voice trembled with urgency. Ryan grabbed her hand and pulled. The warrior surged forward with a sound that was more like the snarl of beasts than any word. Bone tips of spears catching the light, Ryan yanked his pistol free and fired. A single energy shot into the air. The blue flash cracked like thunder. Some of the warriors flinched back, but others pressed closer. Teeth bared, they were fast. Too fast. Ryan pulled a leer, though he didn't yet know her name, toward the gap between two torch poles. The fire hissed as sparks drifted into the air. The crowd closed from both sides. Ryan's boots churned up dust as they burst free of the circle. Shouting rose behind them, the pounding of feet on dirt. He didn't dare look back. The jungle swallowed them quickly, leaves whipping across his arms, roots grabbing at his boots. Behind them came the rhythmic pounding of pursuit, their hunters crashing through brush without hesitation. The girl stumbled over a hidden log, and Ryan caught her before she hit the ground. The moment cost him. A spear whistled past his ear and buried itself in the trunk of a nearby tree. "Run," he muttered, though she could hardly understand him. Her grip on his hand tightened anyway. They sprinted through the tangle of vines. The drums from the fire circle had started again, faster now, almost keeping pace with his heart. Ryan's mind was already calculating distance. They couldn't outpace the whole hunting party in open jungle. They needed cover. They needed something. Anything. Up ahead, moonlight spilled across a low slope. Ryan hauled her toward it, sliding down into a shallow ravine choked with ferns. They ducked behind a fallen tree as heavy footfalls closed in. Ryan leveled his pistol toward the sound, his other hand gently pushing the girl lower into the shadows. Warriors appeared at the ridge above, their bone masks peering into the darkness. Spears ready. One shouted something guttural and sharp, pointing downhill. Ryan didn't wait to see if they were right. He pulled her again, moving in a crouch, weaving between thick trunks. Every breath ragged but controlled. The girl's breaths were quicker, her bare feet silent on the forest floor. Still the shouts behind them didn't fade. He risked a glance over his shoulder and saw the faint glow of their torchlight, weaving through the trees like fireflies in a storm. A vine snagged his arm, and he tore it free, his sleeve ripping. The girl glanced back too, her eyes wide and shining in the darkness. Something in that look hit him harder than the chase. It wasn't just fear, it was trust, and it made him move faster. The pounding of feet came closer, and Ryan knew they wouldn't make it far like this. He scanned the terrain desperately, his eyes catching the faint shimmer of water through the leaves. A river, fast-moving, dangerous, and maybe their only chance. Without slowing, he veered toward it, the ground turning slick underfoot, the roar of the water growing louder. The warriors were almost on them. He could hear the hiss of breath and the rattle of beads and bone. Ryan tightened his grip on her hand. The slope ahead dropped sharply, the river's dark surface waiting. Below, he didn't hesitate. They leaped together into the cold, black rush. The jungle and the firelight vanishing behind them in an instant. The current grabbed them, spun them, and pulled them into the unknown, the girl's hand never leaving his even as the water closed over their heads. The river slammed into Ryan like a living wall. the cold biting into his bones, the current twisting them violently, dragging them through churning darkness. He kicked hard, pulling the girl upward, their heads breaking the surface in a rush of air and spray. She gasped, coughing, her silver hair plastered to her face. The roar of the water swallowing every other sound. He fought to keep them both afloat, the current spinning them toward jagged rocks that jutted like teeth from the river's surface. One struck his shoulder, pain flashing white in his vision. He tightened his grip on her wrist, refusing to let go. The current shifted, dragging them into a calmer stretch, and Ryan angled toward the shore, his legs burning with the effort. They reached the muddy bank and collapsed in the wet grass, breathless, water streaming from their clothes. Above them, the jungle canopy swayed gently, but the peace was a lie. Faint in the distance came the low, rhythmic pounding of drums, slower now, but steady. The hunt wasn't over. Ryan pushed himself to his knees, scanning the tree line. The girl sat up, hugging herself, shivering. Her lips moved, speaking quickly. In her language, frustration flashed in her eyes when he didn't understand. She pointed in one direction, urgency in every movement. He shook his head and pointed another way, needing high ground, needing a vantage point to see where they were. A sudden rustle made them both freeze. Ryan drew his pistol, aiming toward the shadows. A small figure emerged. It was a child, alien like the girl, skin the same, pale silver, eyes wide with terror. The girl gasped and scrambled forward, speaking softly. The child shook its head violently, pointing back the way it had come. Ryan's stomach tightened. He didn't need a translator to know the meaning. The hunters were close, no time for debate. Ryan grabbed the girl's arm and pulled her toward the slope, motioning for the child to follow. They moved fast, but silent, weaving between moss-covered trunks. His senses stretched tight. Every sound in the jungle a possible threat. A sudden crack of wood snapped behind them, and Ryan spun, firing into the dark. The blue flash lit the trees for an instant, revealing 3 warriors closing in, their bone masks glaring in the light. "Go," he barked. Even if they didn't understand the word, the meaning was clear. The girl grabbed the child's hand and ran, Ryan backing toward them while firing 2 more warning shots. The warriors slowed, wary of the weapon, but not enough to stop. He turned and sprinted after the others, the path narrowing until it spilled into a small clearing lit by moonlight. In the center stood an ancient stone monolith, carved with spirals and figures worn smooth by centuries of rain. The girl slowed for a heartbeat, staring at it, as if recognizing something. Ryan shoved her forward, but a sound rose behind them, the deep, bone-shaking call of a war horn. His skin prickled. It meant only one thing: they had been marked. The girl looked at him then, her violet eyes blazing, not just with fear, but with something sharper resolve. She pointed beyond the monolith, into the black mouth of a cave, hidden under a curtain of vines. Ryan hesitated only a second before leading them in, the darkness swallowing them whole, the drums outside fading to a distant throb. But he knew this was only a pause. The hunt would continue, and next time, the warriors wouldn't stop until one of them was dead. The cave air was damp and cold, every sound magnified by the stone walls. Ryan kept one hand on his pistol, and the other brushing the rough surface beside him as they moved deeper. The girl led the way now, her silver hair catching faint glimmers of moonlight filtering through cracks above. The small child clung to her side, their bare feet silent on the slick ground. Somewhere far behind came the faint, uneven echo of footsteps, slower than before but deliberate. The warriors had found their trail. A sharp bend in the passage opened into a cavern where water dripped steadily from stalactites. The smell of whetstone and moss filled Ryan's lungs. The girl stopped, crouching near the wall and tracing something carved into the rock. Spirals, jagged lines, and symbols that glowed faintly with a pale blue light. She spoke quickly, pointing at one spiral, and then toward him. Ryan shook his head, still unable to understand, but something in her tone carried. YTT was a warning. Before he could ask or gesture, a flicker of movement caught his eye. A warrior's mask appeared in the tunnel they'd just left, followed by another and another, their painted bodies moving low and fast. Ryan raised his pistol, firing into the stone above them, shards raining down. The warriors ducked, buying him seconds. Go, he barked again, his voice sharp in the echoing space. The girl grabbed the child and darted toward a narrow crevice at the far side of the cavern. Ryan followed, squeezing through sideways, the rock scraping his jacket. The space beyond opened into another tunnel, this one sloping downward, a faint rush of air telling him there was an exit ahead. The sound of pursuit grew again, closer this time. Their hunters unrelenting, they burst out into the open air, the jungle once again pressing close, thick vines hanging low. Ryan scanned quickly downhill, lay a ribbon of moonlit water, not the main river but a smaller stream. Across it the ground rose sharply, toward a wall of dark cliffs, perfect high ground. He motioned to the girl and the child, then led the way through the undergrowth. Halfway to the stream, the war horn sounded again, closer than it should have been. Ryan cursed under his breath. They must have split their forces. Shadows moved between the trees to their left, another group of warriors closing in to cut them off. Ryan changed direction, heading for a fallen tree, bridging the stream. The girl was right behind him, the child's small hand gripping her tightly. Ryan was halfway across when an arrow hissed past his head, splintering against the log. Two more followed, one grazing his sleeve. He dove to the far side, pulling them both down into the ferns. The warriors didn't rush them this time. They fanned out slowly, circling, their bone masks gleaming in the moonlight. Ryan's breathing steadied, his pistol warm in his grip. The girl's eyes met his, no words exchanged, just that same fierce resolve. She slid a small stone knife from beneath her torn cloth and shifted her stance. The child pressed into the ground, eyes wide. Ryan knew there was no more running. Not tonight. They would have to break the circle or be crushed inside it. Somewhere in the dark, a drum began to beat again, slow and steady, like a heartbeat counting down to the moment they would strike. The drum beat grew heavier, each thud vibrating through the ground beneath them. Ryan's grip tightened on his pistol, his eyes sweeping the shifting shadows. The warriors moved like predators, slow and deliberate, their bone masks catching flashes of moonlight between the leaves. The girl crouched low, her violet eyes never leaving the nearest figure. The child stayed pressed flat to the earth, barely breathing. A sudden cry broke the night as one warrior lunged from the right. Ryan fired, without hesitation, the blue blast lighting the jungle for a heartbeat. The figure dropped, and the rest surged forward in a wave. Ryan rolled to the side, firing again, forcing two more back, but there were too many. The girl sprang up with a speed that startled him, her small knife flashing in the dark. She slashed at a spear shaft, knocking it aside, then drove her shoulder into the warrior's chest, sending him stumbling. Ryan didn't waste the opening. He kicked the man down and grabbed the fallen spear, spinning it in his hands. The solid weight was different from a firearm, but familiar enough. Combat was combat. The warriors circled tighter, their chants rising, echoing through the trees. One darted in from behind, and Ryan swung the spear butt into his ribs. The crack of impact mixing with the deep drum beat. An arrow whistled past the girl's head, and Ryan saw the archer lining up another shot. Without thinking, he shoved her aside and fired. The energy blast lit up the undergrowth. The archer vanished into the shadows. The girl's breathing was sharp but steady now, her earlier fear replaced with something harder. Then Ryan saw I-10 opening, a narrow gap between two of the warriors near the fallen tree. If they could break through there, they might make it to the cliffs before the rest closed in. He jerked his head toward the gap, and the girl nodded instantly. Ryan scooped the child into his arms and charged, the girl right beside him, blocking a spear thrust with her knife. They hit the gap hard, Ryan shoving one warrior aside with his shoulder, the girl slashing another across the arm, and suddenly they were through. The forest floor dropping steeply toward the cliff base. Behind them came furious shouts, the drumbeat now fast and chaotic. Ryan didn't stop running until they reached a jagged outcrop at the cliffside. From here he could see the jungle canopy, stretching endlessly, torches moving like fireflies far below. The girl touched his arm and pointed upward, a narrow path carved into the rock. Ryan didn't hesitate. They began to climb, the child clinging tightly to him. The sound of pursuit slowly fading beneath the rush of the wind against the cliff face. For the first time since the fire circle, Ryan felt the faintest edge of hope, but he knew this was far from over. Somewhere out there, the drums would start again, and when they did, the hunt would begin anew. The climb felt endless, every muscle in Ryan's body burning as he hauled himself up the narrow stone path. The girl moved just ahead of him, steady. Despite her bare feet, the child clung to his back, small hands gripping his jacket like a lifeline. The night air was cooler here, the sounds of the jungle below muffled by distance, but Ryan knew that didn't mean safety. They reached a ledge, halfway up the cliff where the rock jutted out, forming a shallow overhang. Ryan set the child down and scanned the horizon. Far below, torches moved like restless stars. The warriors were still searching, their shouts faint but sharp enough to carry through the still air. He counted at least 3 hunting parties spreading out. They weren't giving up. The girl crouched beside him, motioning toward a cluster of boulders at the far side of the ledge. Ryan followed her there and saw what she meant: an opening, narrow but deep, leading into the cliffside. She spoke softly, pointing at the entrance, her voice low but urgent. Ryan understood the intent, if not the words. It was shelter, inside. The space widened into a hidden chamber lit faintly by strands of glowing moss. Ryan's eyes adjusted quickly, and he noticed shapes in the dust-hold carvings, faded to near invisibility, spirals, jagged lines, and figures that almost matched the symbols he'd seen in the earlier cave. The girl touched one and whispered something, her tone a mix of respect and sorrow. They set the child down on a flat stone, and Ryan pulled a thermal blanket from his pack, wrapping it around the small figure. The girl watched him closely, her eyes softening. For a moment, the tension eased, but Ryan's instincts wouldn't let him rest. He moved to the entrance and listened. That's when he heard it: footsteps. Not from below, but from above, slow, deliberate, and coming closer along the cliff path. Ryan's jaw tightened. The warriors had outflanked them. He glanced back at the girl, raising one finger to his lips. She understood instantly. Gripping her knife, they crouched low, waiting. The footsteps stopped just outside the entrance. A shadow blocked the faint moonlight. Ryan's pistol was steady in his hands, ready to fire, but instead of entering, the figure spoke. The voice was deep and rough, the words foreign, yet somehow calm. The girl's eyes widened in recognition. She answered quickly, her tone sharp. The voice outside replied, slower this time, almost like a warning. Ryan didn't lower his weapon, but he noticed her posture change, less defensive, more conflicted. The shadow lingered a moment longer, then moved away, the sound of retreating footsteps fading into the night. Ryan exhaled slowly. The girl met his eyes, and though no words were exchanged, he understood the truth. Someone among the hunters had just let them live, for now, but it wouldn't last. Dawn crept slowly across the horizon, painting the jungle canopy below in pale gold. Ryan hadn't slept, every sound through the night keeping him on edge. The girl and the child had dozed in turns, but even in sleep, their bodies stayed tense, ready to move. Now the morning light revealed just how far they'd come. Miles of dense green stretched in every direction, with no sign of the fire circle or the torches. But Ryan knew better than to believe they were gone. He stood at the ledge, scanning for movement. The air was cooler here, almost fresh compared to the thick, damp heat below. The girl joined him, silent for a moment, before pointing toward the north. Beyond the treetops, he could just make out a jagged ridge, taller than anything else in sight. She traced a path in the air with her finger, curving around valleys and rivers. He didn't know exactly what she meant, but the determination in her eyes was clear. There was somewhere they had to reach. The child stirred and sat up, rubbing tired eyes. Ryan handed over a ration pack from his belt. The girl took it, breaking it in half and giving the larger piece to the child. Ryan watched quietly. It was a small thing, but it told him more about her than any words could. They set off along the cliff path, moving carefully. Loose stones skittering under their feet. The drop to the jungle floor was dizzying, and more than once Ryan had to catch the girl's arm when the edge crumbled. Hours passed, the sun climbing higher, until they reached a narrow pass between two sheer walls of rock. Ryan slowed, scanning the shadows. Something about the silence felt wrong. The first arrow struck the stone inches from his head, shattering in a spray of splinters. Shouts erupted. From above, warriors appearing along the ridge, their silhouettes stark against the sky. Ryan grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her into the pass, the child running just ahead. More arrows rained down, clattering off stone and slicing through the air. They broke into a wider space beyond the pass, a natural bowl of rock. But it was a trap. Warriors blocked the far exit, their masks painted black this time. Ryan's pulse kicked hard. There was no way back, and the only way forward was through. The girl's knife was already in her hand, her stance low and ready. The child huddled behind a boulder. Ryan raised his pistol, the sunlight glinting off its metal. The warriors hesitated, chanting low and slow, the sound curling through the air like smoke. The leader stepped forward, holding not a weapon but a carved staff. He pointed it at Ryan, then at the girl, speaking words that made her eyes widen. She turned to Ryan, and though he didn't understand, he could read the message in her expression. This was the final choice. Fight and risk dying here, or agree to something the warriors demanded. Something she clearly feared. Ryan's grip tightened on his pistol, his decision already made. Whatever bargain they wanted, it wouldn't happen. Not while he was still breathing. And as the sun rose higher, the tension snapped, both sides moving at once.